Hello students. So today we'll continue on with lecture. Uh, what we'll do today in this video, we're going to cover a brief introduction into a feature called Extrude. Um, so so far we've created drawings, we've used the drawing tools, we've dimensioned, we've used the geometric constraints, and we are now adding Extrude to that list. Okay, so we're still gonna worry about all of the other previous features, and we're gonna still make sure that we have a fully defined sketch, right? So to fully define a sketch, if you remember, we need a position X, position Y, size, and angle. That's still gonna be the case moving forward. So just make sure you understand that, okay? Now, let's briefly talk about dimensions, okay? So dimensions, we have things starting off from 0 dimension going into 1D, eventually going into 2D, and then 3D, okay? Just so we can sort of explain what's happening is an object in 0D can be defined just as a dot in empty space, right? So if we take this dot from 0D and we wanted to convert it over to 1D, what would need to happen? So essentially, this sort of pull motion would have to happen. So if I were to take this dot and drag it down like so, what would I create? I would create a line, right? So this line is now an object in 1 dimension, so it has only 1 dimension, which is this length, okay? Now if I were to take this line and pull it into the 2nd dimension, so notice this is my 1st dimension, now going to the right would probably be something like my 2nd dimension. So if I were to do that, then I would generate a square or a plane or a different object, right? But we sort of get the idea of this planar object. So this planar object or square is now in the 2D realm, right? So now this 2D shape, if I were to turn it into a 3D, I would then have to pull it into that 3rd dimension. So maybe like going out of the page, right? I'm gonna depict it sort of as a diagonal going this way. So if we have a dot and then we pull it down or drag it down, we create a line. We take that line and we drag it to the right, we create a square. If we take this square and drag it this way, we would then generate a cube, right? So this cube is now in that 3D realm, which is what we want to create things on, right? So this square, this motion of pulling or dragging is essentially what Extrude does, right? So now in CAD, we don't usually start at 0 or 1D. We straight up start in 2D objects. So we create a sketch, right? So every single sketch we've created so far is in 2D. Now, our job is now to start generating 3D objects from those 2D sketches. Okay, so in this case, we have this 2D square, and then we drag it into that 3rd dimension to create a cube. So that dragging motion or that pulling motion, that's what Extrude does, okay? So I'm gonna stop with the presentation here, but let's go into Fusion and let's try to replicate what's happening here and maybe create 1 or 2 more examples so you can start getting a hang of Extrude, okay? So back in Fusion, what I'm gonna do is, by the way, notice how I created a new folder for this week. So please go ahead and do that. That way you keep everything organized. Now what I'm gonna do here is I'm first gonna create a sketch. So I'm gonna use the floor sort of as my starting point. And then what I'm gonna do is, if we wanted to sort of generate those steps from 0D, 1D, 2D, and then eventually to 3D, we can do that. So first I could create a point. So go to create and then point, and then I can just place a point out in space, right? So there's my point. Now if I took this point and I dragged it down, so maybe something like this, and I connect the two, we can do that with a line. So I can connect this point to this point. I have now generated a line, right? So if I take this line and I drag it out this way, then I would probably generate something like a rectangle. Okay, so let's do it this way. So there's my line, and I drag it out this way, I generate a rectangle. Now again, this rectangle still has to be fully defined, fully constrained, right? So at this point, the only two things that my rectangle has is my position X and my position Y for this corner. They're both 0, right? So X is 0, Y is 0 for this corner, but I'm still missing size and angle. So let's give it a size. Let's make sure that this is a square. So let's make it, I don't know, 50 and 50. Okay, so there's my height and my width. Okay, so now this has two dimensions right here. So this is dimension 1 and this is dimension 2. So this is my X and my Y. So X is dimension 1, Y is dimension 2. What about my Z? So my Z is either going into the page or out of the page, right? So I'm gonna hit finish sketch just so we can sort of take a look at that. Now we take a look at this corner, we can see that my X is depicted in red. So this is my X, and then my Y, which we cannot see, is depicted in green. So this is my Y right here. Okay, so we have X, Y, and then of course Z going up or down, right? So as you can see, this is how we generate that third dimension. So we have X, Y, and Z. So now we're giving it a depth. We're giving it that third dimension that we need. And all we're doing here is just doing that pulling motion, okay? So let me repeat that. What you need to do in order to go into Extrude, you can either look for Extrude up here, or you can type the shortcut E on your keyboard, okay? So that's E, and then all I need to do is pull up. Now if I wanted to make sure that this is a perfect cube, the other two dimensions were 50, so this third dimension would also have to be 50, okay? So there it is. Now I can rotate and you'll be able to see how we just generated that 3D object from a 2D sketch, okay? So that's extrude, that's that pulling motion. So let's replicate maybe a couple of more examples. So if this is a square, what would we generate in 3D as a 3D object if my original sketch was a circle instead of a square? Okay, so we wouldn't generate a cube, right? So let's create a second sketch, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to generate a circle, so something like this. 50 is fine. So I have my size. Let's get my position in X and my position in Y. There we go. So my position X, position Y, and size. I don't need an angle because a circle this way is the same as a circle this way, right? So I don't need an angle. Okay, so if I have this circle and I wanted to drag it up into that third dimension, I would then generate a cylinder, right? So something like that. Okay. So we're sort of getting the hang of what's happening here, right? Now, one important thing about extrude. Extrude has multiple different operations, okay? So the different operations for extrude include join, cut, intersect, and new body, or new body, new component, okay? So join, it's pretty intuitive. What it's going to do is if you have two different extrusions that touch at one specific point, it's just going to join the two together. It's going to create one body instead of two different bodies, okay? Now cut, it's going to remove material using the parent, the other using the tool, okay? And I'll sort of show you in a second what that does. And also intersect, you can just keep whatever intersects between the two. Now intersect might be a little bit funky, so you sort of have to play around with it a little bit. And we don't really use intersect too often. We're mostly interested in join and cut, okay? Now, That being said, let's try to create something like you would find in a kid's room. Okay, so you've all probably played with Legos before. So both of these components seem very similar to Legos, right? So I would just have to sort of have this cylinder on top of my square, and then go a specific length, and then maybe round off some of the edges and things like that, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this extrusion and this sketch. Okay, so I'm just gonna right click, delete. Yeah, go ahead and delete it, and then delete that extrude as well. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna generate a new sketch. Okay, now originally we have the main three planes, right? So that we have the let me do it this way. So I'm gonna hide the body. So we have the three main planes, right? So we have the XY, YZ, and XZ. Okay. Now those three planes are not the only ones we can use. Okay, they're the main ones, but in this case, when we generated this new cube, we now have more planes to use, right? So we still have this plane, which is the same. We still have this plane, which is the same, but we also have the two on the opposite sides, which are just the same planes except there's an offset, right? So this plane and this plane are the same except there's 50 millimeters between the two, right? And on top of that, we also have the top and bottom, right? Now what I'm going to do is, because I want to generate a circle up here, I'm going to use this new surface which wasn't there before as the plane to create my second sketch. Okay, so anytime you create a new body like that, you can always use one of the new faces as a plane to generate a new sketch. Okay, so here I'm going to select that top face, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create that circle like so. Now I can give it dimensions just like before, so 25 in my X, 25 in my Y, and of course it has to have a size, because what's going on there, there's a tangent constraint. So it's taking this circle and it's making a tangent to this specific edge right here. Okay. Okay, so now let's keep on working on this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this same circle, but now I'm going to extrude it up this way to generate a new body, right? So I'm going to finish the sketch. I'm going to extrude. I'm going to select that surface, and then I'm going to move it up. Instead of going the whole 50, maybe go 35 or something like that, or maybe even less, maybe 30. And that's the way I would generate my new body, right? Now in this case, I already had an existing body down here, so my operation, because I'm not intersecting or I'm not going into the material, instead I'm just intersecting or touching and then creating more material, Fusion will automatically try to do a joint operation. Okay, so now if I were to hit OK there, I would join this material with this material, and I would just have one body. Okay, and as you can see here, I still have body number 1, and now it's the whole thing instead of this one and then body number 2 being this one. Okay, so that's the first part. All right, now what happens if I wanted to sort of hollow out the bottom? So in this case, even though this sort of looks like a Lego, it's really not a Lego yet, right? So there's nothing, so there's not a hollow portion down here that can allow me to attach multiple Legos to this one Lego, right? So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to create another sketch here and then extrude up into a material to remove and make it hollow, right? So what I'll do is, just like we did previously, I'm gonna create a sketch. I'm gonna select the bottom surface, and this time I'm gonna make another circle like so, and still give it dimensions. Okay, so there's my position Y, and there's my position X. There we go. Okay, Now in this case, notice how it didn't add that tangent constraint, but that's okay. We can also add just a regular dimension. Okay, so in this case, I add diameter. Now we have a fully constrained sketch, just like we did before. And then what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna extrude. So I'm gonna either type E or finish the sketch and look for extrude down here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into a material. How much? It all depends. So maybe like 35, 30, I don't know. Okay. So as you can see there, it's now automatically trying to select a cut operation, and it's gonna highlight that area or that volume sort of in that gray red color, sort of depicting you that you're trying to remove it. Okay. So I'm gonna hit OK. And now it might not seem like it did much, but if we scroll down, we can now see that this portion on the bottom is hollow, right? So of course this is not a perfect Lego, but it's sort of kind of close to what a Lego would be, right? And again, we're just using this as an example. All right, so I'll go ahead and stop here, and then we'll carry on with some more examples for extrude. Just remember that what we'll do from now on is we'll probably start working on a little bit more complex of a sketch. But no matter how complex the sketch is, you can still create it. And then once you have that sketch ready, then we'll move forward with creating a 3D object. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this video here. Make sure you save this this file. I'll probably save it something like Extrude Intro. Okay. All right, and okay, it's saved in here. I can just move this. So right click it, move. I want it to go into week 3. Move it. Okay. All right. So there's my intro to Extrude week 3. I'm good to go. All right. So I'll go ahead and stop my video here, and I'll see you in a bit.